Hello, extensional analysis and free will. But first, metaphor. Why metaphor? Because metaphor is how the brain works. It's how everything in the brain works from metaphor. Isn't that ironic? That it turns out the poets of all of our intellectuals, with their command of metaphor, turned out to be just as deep as they seem to be. See, that's why they seem so deep. Because everything comes down to metaphor. So first, metaphor. Do we have free will? Well, I think the word free has a bit of a fishy, definition that we really have to sort out before we can answer that question. In other words, the word free has to be a reliable tool before we can use it to ask something as deep as free will. Now, I'm going to talk about free will, even though I said the word free needs to be defined, because you see, it's also a name. Free will is a name for all kinds of behavior. Like, it's free will anytime you're tempted to do something that most people say you shouldn't do, and that's a big part of free will right there. Now, if you take everything that's in free will and back to the question of what does free mean, well, I think it's something like this. I'm a materialist when it comes down to it. I do entertain some metaphysical ideas because they're interesting, I think they're interesting. But I'm going to say that the brain is just the brain, the mind is in the brain, and it's all material, it's chemicals. Okay, so it's chemical reactions, in other words. Now, here's the metaphor. Water is flowing downhill in a river. It moves all over the place, and it has certain, things that look random, but as we would most likely think, it's shaped by the land that it's flowing through. So in reality, it's just flowing downhill in the way that it sort of has to. And the question of free will is that how we are? Do we just flow as a chemical reaction, or do we have some way to steer this thing? Somebody brought up free will, and from the context of there is no free will, and the will simply is rationalizing after we do something, the reason, explaining why we did it. Now, that's what I believe is one of my favorite philosophers. That's his psychology says that we basically justify things after the fact. But it doesn't really matter, because if the unconscious mind is generating these actions, it can still influence, and that's still me. I do believe the consciousness, by the way, is a really limited thing that's just looking at the rest of the brain and trying to take responsibility for it all. Yeah, that's me. And, it's doing that in order to give us cohesion. So we have to let it do that. You want it in touch. And in a way, it can take responsibility. It does have influences as well. But yes, a lot of this action that we might use in just everyday examples is going to be unconscious things that our brain as a whole is generating. So, extensional analysis of free will. Well, as I said, free will is a name. So the extensional analysis says go to the extension first. Forget about what you think the word free means. Go to free will, look at the things in there. So, I'm going to go through those things. Well, not all of them, because I won't think of all of them probably. But I'll try to find some categories. And I'll do the categories one at a time. Now, the first category is crime.